The first cold wind of December swept across the foothills of eastern Tennessee, bending the tall grass and rattling the single strong fence line that stretched along the McAllister farm. In the dim light of a fading afternoon, Ethan McAllister stood beside an old oak tree, the same one his grandfather had planted decades earlier for stability and legacy. Yet today it felt like a silent witness to his unraveling. The Christmas season was approaching, but inside Ethan, clarity had slipped away. His purpose felt thin, stretched, worn by months of quiet disappointments and responsibilities he no longer felt strong enough to carry. A storm was building in the sky, but the heavier storm was inside him, questions about direction, discipline, and whether his life still carried meaning. A rope used for guiding his cattle hung loosely in his hand, but even that small tool of discipline felt heavier than usual, as if it, too, questioned his certainty. Beyond the oak tree, the horizon glowed faintly with a pale winter light, a horizon that once filled him with purpose now felt distant and unreachable. The animals sensed his unrest. A usually calm mare paced her stall, glancing toward him with uneasy eyes. Even creation seemed to echo his internal burden. Ethan's breath trembled as he whispered the question he'd been avoiding for weeks. "Lord, what am I even doing anymore?" The words floated into the cold air like a quiet prayer, an exhausted man's plea for insight, direction, and inner strength. The mist tightened around him, obscuring the path home, matching the fog in his spirit. He didn't yet know it, but this winter would bring the turning point, one shaped by leadership, resilience, and divine timing. But it didn't start there. We must go back a little in time. Before the cold winds and the heavy December questions, the McAllister farm moved with the gentle rhythm of early spring. Back then, Ethan still carried a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from routine, discipline, and the steady predictability of rural life. Each morning, before the sun rose over the Appalachian foothills, he walked the wide, curved path that led from his farmhouse to the barn. It was a path his father had walked, and his father before him, a simple trail carved by years of footsteps, responsibility, and intentional living. Ethan often said that this path taught him more about leadership than any book could. It demanded consistency, focus, and a willingness to show up even when emotions ran thin. And for many years, he did show up, faithful, steady, aligned with the long-term vision he believed God had placed in his heart. But something subtle had begun to shift. It started in small moments, when he lingered too long at the old oak tree, wondering if his grandfather had ever struggled with doubt. When he noticed the lifting mist in the mornings didn't bring the same clarity it once did. When he caught himself staring at the horizon, wishing for direction rather than walking with it. By summer, Ethan's burden grew heavier, not because the work increased, but because purpose quietly thinned. He still fed the animals, repaired the fence line, tended the pastures, and managed the land with integrity. Outwardly, no one saw the strain, but inwardly, something sacred was slipping. The first real sign came one warm afternoon in June. Ethan had taken a moment to rest on the fence line, overlooking the pasture where a few cattle grazed peacefully. The air smelled of hay and coming rain, and the wind shifted in a way he normally recognized as divine guidance. Yet on that day, the shift brought him no comfort, only the unsettling awareness that he felt disconnected from the life he was supposed to be stewarding. His sister, Emily, stopped by that afternoon with a basket of fresh bread. She had always been the one with a sharp sense for emotional maturity. She could read Ethan's storms before he felt the first drop. "You're quiet today," she said, leaning against the fence beside him. "Just tired," Ethan answered automatically. But Emily studied him with the kind of insight only family can carry. tired is one thing," she said softly, "but this looks like a man losing direction." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He didn't reply. He wasn't ready to face the truth she so effortlessly named. Later that week, Ethan spent a long evening in the barn, fixing a lantern whose wick had worn down. He liked tasks that required discipline and strategic thinking. It usually centered him. But that night, even the simple work frustrated him. The lantern slipped in his hands, the light flickered and died, and something in him cracked. He whispered into the quiet, "What am I missing?" The stillness of the barn did not answer, but Ethan felt the question lodge deep within him. It was the moment he first sensed that he was drifting from his purpose, not abandoning it, but slowly losing touch with the heartbeat behind his labor. That summer continued with its routine pressures, each day pressing slightly harder than the one before. Ethan's inner strength began to wobble, and his once steady leadership felt fragile. He wasn't failing, but he felt hollow, like a man walking a path without knowing why. By September, even the animals sensed something shifting in him. His old mare, Daisy, who usually greeted him with calm confidence, began watching him with alert, uncertain eyes. Animals can feel when a man's spirit is unsettled. They react to what is unspoken. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the horizon with a soft glow of gold and rose, Ethan stood on that same wide, curved path, staring at the light. A breeze stirred, gentle but insistent, brushing against his shoulders like a quiet reminder. He felt, for the first time, that he was approaching a crossroads, one that would demand honesty, resilience, and a kind of transformation he wasn't sure he was prepared for. This was the beginning of his purpose crisis, and he had no idea how deep it would take him, or how much clarity God would eventually bring through it. Before the crisis fully settled over him, Ethan carried a dream so humble he rarely spoke it aloud. It wasn't about money or recognition or expansion. It was simpler, yet deeper than anything he had dared to share. For years, he had imagined transforming a section of the McAllister land into a retreat pasture, a quiet space where tired farmers, overstretched fathers, and wandering souls could rest, breathe, and recover their clarity. A place shaped by peace, long-term vision, and intentional living. A place where still water reflected the quiet of a man's heart, and the old oak tree stood as a symbol of stability and legacy. He imagined wooden benches placed under the shade, a lantern-lit path for evening reflection, and cattle grazing freely along the edges, not as work, but as reminders of God's gentle order. He dreamed of offering one-on-one mentorship to young men wrestling with direction, discipline, and identity. Leadership not as authority, but as stewardship. Whenever he pictured it, his chest filled with a warmth that felt like purpose. But dreams, he knew, carried weight. And this one felt almost too sacred to touch. One late evening in October, after another long day repairing fences and managing accounts, Ethan sat on the porch with a notebook. He rarely journaled, but that night something inside pushed him to put words on paper. The horizon glowed faintly as the last bit of daylight drifted away and a soft wind moved through the trees, a gentle reminder of divine timing. He opened the notebook. He wrote slowly, deliberately, "I want to build a place where broken men find direction again, a place where clarity returns like the lifting mist, a place of peace." The more he wrote, the more the dream unfolded, strategic thinking mixing with spiritual intuition. He outlined the land he'd use, the way he'd structure the cabins, how he would weave leadership lessons into the rhythms of rural life. He even wrote the name he imagined. When he finished, he closed the notebook and held it against his chest. His breath trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of meaning. He whispered a small prayer, barely audible. "Lord, if this is from you, let me have the courage to walk in it." There was no thunder, no sign in the sky, just a quiet moment of gratitude and a subtle reassurance settling in his spirit, the kind only God could give. Yet the moment didn't last. Because as autumn turned colder, Ethan began doubting the vision, doubting himself, doubting whether a man worn by discouragement could lead anyone to transformation. The dream felt fragile, like a thin sheet of ice forming over deep water. And as responsibilities grew heavier, he wondered if Stillwater Haven was nothing more than wishful thinking. But the seed had already been planted, and seeds, even when forgotten, know how to push through the soil in divine timing. Ethan just didn't know that the greatest test of his purpose was coming, one that would demand every ounce of his inner strength, emotional maturity, and integrity. And it was going to start from within. Winter approached earlier than usual that year, and with it came a deep internal frost Ethan couldn't shake. The crisis didn't arrive with drama or catastrophe. It crept in quietly, like a cold draft slipping through the cracks of a familiar home. At first, he dismissed it as fatigue, then as stress, but eventually even he had to admit something inside him was breaking down. The discipline that once structured his mornings felt heavy. The wide curved path from the house to the barn, which for years had anchored his direction, now looked like a reminder of responsibilities he no longer felt strong enough to steward. Each step echoed a quiet question he didn't want to face. What if I've lost my purpose? Some mornings, he paused halfway down the path, staring at the old oak tree as if it held the answers. The horizon beyond it still glowed each dawn with the same golden promise. But Ethan no longer felt connected to that promise. Inside, the mist never lifted. One cold morning, frost crunching beneath his boots, he found himself sitting on a fence post beside the pasture. The cattle watched him, sensing the instability in his spirit. His mare, Daisy, approached with caution, ears flicking back and forth. Animals always knew when a man's inner strength wavered. She nudged him lightly, almost pleading for him to steady himself. "I'm trying," Ethan whispered, running a shaking hand along her neck. I can't find my direction anymore." He didn't cry, not because he was strong, but because he felt numb. That numbness bled into everything. He began making small mistakes, overlooking feed schedules, misplacing tools, leaving repairs half-finished. His consistency, once a cornerstone of his identity, eroded quickly. Even Emily noticed. "Ethan," she said one evening, standing in the barn doorway as he knelt beside a broken gate hinge, "you're wearing yourself thin. This isn't like you." He wanted to respond, to offer some practiced reassurance, but honesty slipped out instead. "I feel lost, Em." Her expression softened. "Lost isn't failure," she said gently, "but pretending you're not lost, that can break a man." Her words carried wisdom, but they didn't dissolve the ache. The first major collapse came a week later. Ethan had planned to clear a patch of land, part of his long-term vision for Stillwater Haven, but halfway through the task, he froze. His axe hung mid-air, suspended in his grip, as a wave of exhaustion washed over him. Not physical exhaustion, something deeper, heavier, the kind that steals a man's clarity, leaving only fog. He leaned against the plow, breathing hard, his chest tight. "What's wrong with me?" he murmured. The wind picked up suddenly, swirling dust around him. Not a divine wind this time, just a cold, indifferent gust that stung his eyes and blurred his sight. He dropped the axe, letting it fall into the frozen soil with a dull thud. The sound echoed a truth he'd fought for months. He was not okay. That evening he sat inside his darkened barn, lantern unlit, staring into the shadows. The silence felt heavier than usual, filled with questions about identity, leadership, and meaning. Had he wasted his years? Was his father's legacy slipping through his hands? Was Stillwater Haven nothing more than a passing fancy? His heart whispered a fear he hadn't spoken aloud. Maybe I'm not the man for this. He pressed his palms to his face and let out a slow, broken breath. Everything in him wanted clarity, but all he had was fog. Everything in him wanted resilience, but his spirit felt frayed. And then came the moment that nearly broke him. As he stood to leave the barn, his knee buckled slightly, not from injury, but from the weight of unspoken burdens. He grabbed a beam to steady himself and stared into the darkness, humiliated by his own weakness. He whispered into the quiet, "Lord, if you're here, I can't feel you, and I don't know how to keep going." The stillness answered with a painful truth, one every man eventually faces. Before transformation comes, the soul must confront its emptiness. Ethan was now fully in that place. He walked back toward the house under a moonless sky, the wide, curved path barely visible. The mist was thick, swallowing the horizon. No wind shift, no sign of divine timing. Just a man wrestling himself and losing. The internal storm was already wearing Ethan down, but the injustice that followed hit him like a cold wind cutting through an unpatched jacket. Weakness invites opportunists, and in rural communities, opportunists often smile while they cut the deepest. The trouble began with Caleb Rourke, a neighboring landowner known for his sharp tongue and sharper ambition. Caleb had always wanted a piece of the McAllister land, particularly the section Ethan dreamed of turning into Stillwater Haven. It bordered a creek that stayed full year-round and had soil rich enough to grow nearly anything. Ethan knew his father had refused Caleb's offers long ago, and Caleb never forgot the insult. The moment Caleb sensed Ethan's spirit faltering, he moved in like a fox, slipping under a weakened fence line. One cold morning, Ethan found Caleb's truck parked near the edge of his pasture. Caleb leaned against the hood with the casual arrogance of a man who believed life owed him more than it had given. "Morning, Ethan," Caleb called as Ethan approached, tightening his coat against the bitter wind. "What are you doing on my land, Caleb?" Caleb smiled, too easily, too wide. "Just checking the property lines. There've been some changes in the county maps." "Thought you might not have heard." Ethan's stomach tightened. He didn't have the energy for a confrontation. Not today. Caleb pulled a rolled paper from his truck. "See here. The new boundary adjustments show this section." He tapped the land Ethan planned to use for Stillwater Haven as open for renegotiation. "You're sitting on land I could make real use of." Ethan clenched his jaw. "That land isn't for sale." Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Everything's for sale when a man's running out of direction." The words hit harder than they should have. Ethan felt them crack against the insecurity already festering inside him. Caleb's eyes narrowed with predatory insight. He had found the wound. "You look tired, Ethan," he added. "This farm's too much for one man. Why not let go of what you can't manage?" Ethan turned away before anger got the best of him. But as he walked back toward the barn, he knew the conversation wasn't over. Men like Caleb didn't give up when they smelled weakness. 2 weeks later, the second confrontation came. This time, it wasn't Caleb alone. It was a county inspector standing beside him, clipboard in hand. Ethan had been repairing a broken section of fence when he saw them walking his land as if they owned it. Daisy, unsettled by the tension in the air, paced behind the fence line, ears pinned back. "What now?" Ethan asked, his voice low, weary. The inspector cleared his throat. "We received a complaint about improper drainage and land mismanagement on your property." Ethan's eyes shot to Caleb, who shrugged with mock innocence. "Just doing my civic duty, Ethan. If there are issues, they need attention." "There are no drainage issues on this land," Ethan said sharply. The inspector, uncomfortable, adjusted his glasses. "We still need to investigate." Ethan stood tall, though inside he felt hollow. "Do what you need. I've got nothing to hide." Caleb smirked, whispering as he walked past, "Everybody breaks eventually." Ethan watched him go, fists clenched. The injustice was blatant. Caleb was using the system to pressure him, hoping to wear him down until he sold the land. And Ethan, already stripped of his clarity and strength, felt dangerously close to snapping. After the inspector left, Ethan leaned against the fence line, breathing hard. A storm cloud sky darkened the foothills. His heart pounded with a mix of humiliation, anger, and despair. He felt the horizon closing in instead of glowing with direction. Emily arrived just in time to see him sinking into the weight of it. "Ethan!" she called, hurrying over. "What happened?" He explained everything, the accusations, Caleb's manipulative pushes, the county threat. As he spoke, Ethan's voice cracked in ways he'd never allowed before. "I can't fight him, Em," he said. "Not like this. I don't even know who I am anymore." Emily placed a steady hand on his arm. "He's trying to break you because he sees your weakness. But weakness doesn't define a man's integrity." "It sure feels like it does," Ethan muttered. "No," she said firmly. "Character outlasts cleverness. You know that." Her words landed, but they didn't lift the burden. That night, Ethan walked the wide curved path toward the barn, lantern in hand. The flame flickered unsteadily, mirroring his spirit. Inside, he sank to the ground, leaning against a bale of hay. The cold wind rattled the metal roof. Daisy snorted nervously, as if she sensed the spiritual tension. "Why, Lord?" Ethan whispered, voice trembling. "Why would you give me a vision and then let everything fall apart? Where's the purpose in this?" His prayer echoed into the dark barn, unanswered, or so it seemed. But transformation often begins in silence, and Ethan was about to witness how injustice eventually collapses under its own weight, long before a righteous man breaks. Caleb Rourke had pushed too far, driven by a hunger that outpaced his integrity. Ethan didn't know it yet, but injustice has a strange habit. It digs its own grave while believing it's building a throne. Late December brought heavy rain to Tennessee, 3 days of steady downpour that turned the foothills into rivers of red clay. Ethan, exhausted and discouraged, stayed inside repairing tools and trying not to think about the looming county inspection. But nature has a way of revealing truth, especially where manipulation tries to hide. On the third morning, Emily burst through Ethan's door without knocking. "Ethan!" she gasped, soaked from the rain. "You need to come, now!" He grabbed his coat and followed her down the wide, curved path, mud splashing under their boots. When they reached the southern edge of the property, the land Caleb coveted so desperately, Ethan stopped cold. A long section of earth had collapsed. Water poured through a gap in the hillside, rushing straight onto Caleb's adjacent property. Trees leaned at dangerous angles, roots exposed. The ground had given way, revealing something Caleb had been hiding for months, an illegal trench he'd dug to divert water away from his land and toward Ethan's. Except the trench had failed completely. County trucks already lined the road. Inspectors moved through the mud with urgency. Caleb stood ankle-deep in water, shouting at officials who ignored him completely. Ethan approached slowly, disbelief tightening in his chest. One inspector turned to him. "Mr. McAllister, we owe you an apology. The complaint filed against you was based on falsified information." Ethan blinked. "Falsified?" "Yes, sir," the inspector said. "Mr. Rourke submitted altered maps and unapproved drainage plans. This collapse exposed everything." Caleb spun toward them, rage twisting his face. "I didn't do anything wrong. He's the one—" The inspector cut him off. "Mr. Rourke, you will remain silent. You are facing county violations, fines, and potential criminal charges." Ethan watched Caleb's expression shift from fury to panic. No fight left him standing, only guilt, and the weight of consequences he had built with his own hands. Emily whispered, "Told you, character outlasts cleverness." Ethan didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. Instead, he felt something steadier, a quiet confirmation that integrity, even when strained, remains unshakable in God's timing. Caleb was escorted away, shouting useless protests as the inspectors documented everything. The truth had risen to the surface exactly when needed. Ethan looked over the damaged land, the broken hillside, the rushing water. The storm had revealed what deception tried to bury. He felt a wind shift, soft, cleansing, unmistakably divine. And for the first time in months, a thin strand of clarity threaded through the fog inside him. The injustice had fallen, the pressure had lifted, but something far greater was coming, a breakthrough written long before Ethan lost sight of it, a blessing waiting behind the storm. The morning after Caleb's downfall, the rain finally stopped. The world felt washed clean, fields glistening, fence posts darkened with moisture, the air thick with the scent of renewal. Ethan stepped outside before sunrise, lantern in hand, unsure why his spirit felt different but sensing something shifting deep within him. As he walked the wide, curved path, the mist began to lift, not abruptly, but slowly, like a veil being drawn back from the eyes of a weary soul. Daisy stood calmly near the fence line, no longer pacing with anxious energy. She lifted her head toward Ethan, exhaling softly, as if acknowledging that the storm, inside and out, had broken. He approached the old oak tree and paused. The horizon beyond it pulsed with a golden glow, more radiant than he had seen in months. It wasn't just a sunrise, it was a promise, a quiet declaration that clarity was returning, direction unfolding, purpose awakening. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in a long time, the air felt warm with inner strength, not strain. Emily joined him a few moments later, wrapping her coat tighter around her shoulders. She stood beside him without speaking, letting the silence carry meaning. Finally, she whispered, "You feel different." "I am," Ethan said. Something broke and something healed. The wind shifted again, gentle, sure, unmistakable. The kind of wind Ethan had always interpreted as divine guidance. Only now, after months of fog and fear, he felt its meaning clearly. He looked down at his hands. They no longer trembled. "I thought God had forgotten me," he said quietly. "But he was working the whole time, even when I couldn't see it." Emily smiled, eyes soft with understanding. "Purpose doesn't disappear, Ethan. Sometimes it's refined." He turned toward the southern field, the one that had been nearly taken from him. The collapsed hillside looked rough, broken, unsettled, but beyond it, the creek shimmered with new reflection, catching the first gold of the rising sun. "Stillwater Haven," Ethan whispered. "It's not dead." "No," Emily said. "It's beginning." Her words struck something deep in him, a breakthrough, a rush of clarity so sharp and luminous it almost hurt. The land wasn't ruined. The collapse had cleared years of debris, opening space that had been untouched since before his grandfather's time. Soil experts later confirmed that the ground underneath, newly exposed, was even richer and more fertile than the surface soil Caleb had coveted. What Caleb tried to destroy had been reshaped into Ethan's greatest opportunity. He felt his knees weaken, not from despair this time, but from gratitude so overwhelming it brought him nearly to tears. He lowered his head, whispering a quiet prayer, steadier now, full of certainty and reverence. "Thank you," he breathed, "for protection I didn't see, for timing I didn't understand, and for bringing me back to purpose." And then he spoke the truth aloud, the one every man eventually learns. God never arrives late. A hawk soared overhead, wings stretched wide against the glowing horizon. Daisy let out a low, peaceful whinny. Even the wind softened, brushing Ethan's shoulders with warmth, as if heaven itself acknowledged his return to direction. He opened his notebook, the same one where months earlier he had written about Stillwater Haven. The ink from that night felt prophetic now. He traced the words with a steadier hand. He no longer trembled. He no longer doubted. Where there had once been emptiness, purpose had returned, and where there had been fog, clarity rose with the sun. Ethan lifted his eyes to the horizon, glowing, expansive, alive with divine promise. Stillwater Haven would be built, not because he was strong, but because God had strengthened him. Not because timing was convenient, but because timing was holy. Not because the storm never came, but because the storm ended exactly when it should. And now, finally, Ethan walked forward in transformation, aligned with leadership, resilience, integrity, and long-term vision. Purpose restored, direction renewed, peace unfolding. In the years that followed, Ethan McAllister often told younger men that peace is not found in the absence of burdens, but in the clarity God restores when a man refuses to surrender his integrity. He learned that storms do not erase purpose, they refine it. They strip away illusions, sharpen direction, and rebuild inner strength from the inside out. He would stand beneath the old oak tree, looking toward the horizon glowing with morning light, and say, "Leadership begins the moment a man chooses integrity over pressure." Those who stay faithful in the fog eventually walk in clarity. And often, God strengthens a man before he blesses him. Stillwater Haven became a refuge, not simply because the land was peaceful, but because Ethan's character had been rebuilt through discipline, resilience, and intentional living. Men arrived burdened, discouraged, or facing their own purpose crises, and they left steadier, clearer, anchored in long-term vision. Ethan's life became a quiet testimony to a simple truth. A man aligned with God's timing carries a peace no injustice, no storm, and no season can take from him. And each Christmas, as the cold wind brushed across the foothills, and the lanterns of Stillwater Haven glowed softly in the dusk, Ethan whispered a prayer of gratitude for the journey that carved wisdom into his soul. Peace was never far. It was simply waiting for the man he would become. Even when the year feels heavy, even when your purpose feels buried under responsibilities and unanswered questions, remember Ethan's journey. Clarity returns, direction strengthens, and peace rises exactly when God knows you need it most. God never arrives late. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that resilience grows in quiet places and that your life still carries long-term vision, subscribe now. Join a community of people choosing integrity, inner strength, and intentional living every single day. And before you go, the video appearing on your screen right now carries the next step of this journey, another lesson in purpose, leadership, and divine timing. Click it and keep walking the path toward the clarity that's waiting for you.